FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Congressman Doug Collins from Georgia's 9th District, thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
First off, can you tell us a little bit about your district and the kinds of agriculture in it?
Oh, great. The 9th District of Georgia is one of the heaviest agricultural districts in Georgia. Most people don't realize that because we're in the northeast corner. We're in the mountains, the foothills of northeast Georgia. So it's the corner bordering Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. But in our district, we have everything ranging from the normal poultry, which is we're the chicken capital of the world, to livestock, which we're in Georgia. Two of our counties are in the top 10, in fact, the top producing of cattle. And then we also have some row crops, not as much as we have in South Georgia, but then we also have a lot of what I call the agritourism business. We have a lot of wineries here popping up. We have a lot of pick-your-own farms. We have peaches. We have apples. We have all those kind of things. So it's a really diverse agricultural district.
So you mentioned the amount of agriculture that you have in your district, and one of the committee assignments that you have, you're on Rules and Judiciary,
yes,
not on House Agriculture.
Right.
Now, there's only so many people that can be on House Agriculture, and everyone has agriculture in their district in some form, either through production or nutrition capabilities. So how do you represent your agricultural constituents while not serving on the Agriculture Committee?
Well, the good thing about it is we're on Rules Committee, which sees every bill that comes through. So in doing that, there's a lot of bills that come through, whether it be the Farm Bill or labeling issues, things that we've been dealing with, so that you're able to work with the districts and also from a perspective. Also, one of the things from a perspective of agriculture, it's not just simply many times the ag issues, traditional ag issues that you think of in the Agricultural Committee, the farming, the regulations. It's also, agribusiness has grown so much now. You deal in tax issues, you deal in business issues, you deal in regulatory issues, which the Judiciary Committee handles a great deal of those regulatory issues with the different agencies. So it really puts us in a unique position, especially like on Waters of the USA and a lot of the other oversight committees that we have that are sue and settle, that have been very detrimental in many times to agricultural interests. We're able to have input through the Judiciary Committee, but also through rules as well.
And how does your own personal experience, be it your own experience with agriculture, your experience dealing with agricultural producers, how does that help you, represent those constituents in Washington?
Well, it's great. One of the things, I'm born and raised in my district, so I'm 49 years in the 9th District of Georgia. I know the area very well. My mom was raised on a dairy farm in Greene County, just outside my district, so I grew up around dairy cows growing up and going back home to my granddaddy's farm. And my wife's family is from Banks County, where they have done everything from growing minks to chickens to most everything in between, peaches and stuff. So we've been very fortunate to be around those industries for a long time. We understand them. And Gainesville being the central headquarters for many of the poultry, modernization of poultry that's come along in the capital, really the center of the poultry industry. We've also raised chickens. We've had a broiler farm when Lisa and I were first married, and now we still have the broiler farm through my wife and her sister after my father-in-law passed away. So we're still raising chickens, and so we stay very involved with the folks around on that.
Now, one of the things that when you talk to producers and talk to a lot of agricultural organizations, there's a fear of government regulation.
Yes.
And so with that in mind, I don't think anyone is calling for all government regulations to be completely abolished. So where do you think is a good balance between appropriate regulations for production and this over-regulation that a lot of producers are saying they're feeling right now?
Well, I think one of the things that we miss in Washington, D.C. is what, it goes back to a saying that my grandmother used to tell me before. She said, "Son, common sense ain't common." And I think that's what we lack in a lot of times these regulatory issues, when you have folks who are separated by various degrees from the farm. When we have those kind of issues that they're not seeing the day-to-day problems, or it's real easy to, in the academic setting or in a cubicle setting, to say this regulation makes sense, but yet when you actually play it out on the farm or in the agricultural processing community, it doesn't work, or actually puts us behind as we would have in line speeds and stuff like that in the poultry processing industry. I think that's what we need more. There needs to be a balance of listening to the farmers, the folks on the ground, the extension agents, those folks who know day to day what's going on in these industries and how best to take a rule that may be very applicable, say in Michigan, but is very unapplicable to any of the issues that we're facing in Northeast Georgia. So I think it's just mainly a common sense. It's listening. It's just being engaged. And I think sometimes we've gotten disconnected, especially from a Washington perspective, in big issues to the local farm.
Now, let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about you personally. You've got some experience that I think is kind of unique within Congress. You spent some time as a pastor.
Yes.
So why the jump from pastor to politician?
Well, it's really interesting. I believe my life story I've told somebody is about like a good Northeast Georgia mountain road. It has a lot of turns in it. And one of the things that I have as pastoring is my faith is very important to me. I'm still an Air Force chaplain, actually. I still serve in the military as an Air Force chaplain and served in Iraq in 2008. But also I felt led to go in another direction, basically a ministry field, if you would, and I went back to law school. So I actually have a law degree as well. Again, for some, that's a little bit of a contradiction. I understand grace and law. But it gives me, I believe, a time to take my faith, but also to use it practically in being a part of a solution and working to help people find their place as well.
So with that in mind, when you serve in Congress, I mean, you've been here for a few terms now, how has Congress changed while you were here?
I think what we're seeing a lot now in Congress, and I actually did an internship in the very seat that I hold back in 1987 when I was up there. I actually have a picture here in my office that I keep just to remind me of where I come from, but also the difference in change. And what I've seen over the past few years when I served in the Georgia legislature and now serve up here in Congress is the amount of information that's out there. Some well thought out, some not so well thought out, and I think that's the part that is the most difficult in serving these days, is trying to make sure that our constituents back home understand what's going on in Washington, understand that we're as frustrated as they are many times, but making sure that that information is being communicated in a way that says, okay, here's why some things are going the way it is, and here's some ways we can make it better. But I think that glut of information, many times from folks who may be having a stakeholder in the information, has made it a little more challenging to serve.
Now, a lot of talk throughout the campaign process, for be it president, congressman, what have you, is kind of this insider versus outsider mentality. Someone that's a Washington insider, which I mean, now you could maybe consider yourself being a couple of term congressman here, but also an outsider, someone that served as a pastor, served in the military. So you're kind of meeting in the middle of both that insider and outsider territory. So I mean, do you feel the kind of a pull from both directions when you're serving in Congress? You
do, because like I said, I think my experience, not only doing the things you mentioned, but also as a small business owner. We owned a retail store, a scrapbook store years ago. I understand the pulls of both, and I think most of the times nowadays is basically when you get into office, people assume now that you're the insider, your establishment, no matter how much you're working. I think what we try to do is I'm home every week in the district. I'm back home. We do a lot of stuff with telephone town halls. We do in-person town halls. We're in businesses. I'm on the farms. I'm in the feed stores. Folks know me. They can see me. When they disagree with me, believe me, they'll tell me. But I think it's just mainly being honest with people. I think that's the key is I come up here to do a job. And I made this comment just the last few days to some folks up here. I leave the four most precious people in the world to me, and that's my wife and 3 kids, to come up here. And I won't do that if I didn't think we could make a difference. And that means that you have to play the cards, so to speak, that you're dealt with up here. A very set process. There are very differing views, and the people of the nation have saw fit to have a divided government in which we have a president from one party. Now we do have the House and the Senate, but even in the Senate, we don't have a filibuster-proof majority. So you've got to learn to work around those situations, but never back up on your principles while at the same time trying to make a difference.
Congressman Doug Collins from Georgia's 9th District, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So glad to be here.